Thank you very much. Well, welcome. And as was mentioned, this is a presentation where I'm going to talk about data and database trends. So, what are we going to cover? We're going to look at the current landscape of database management and database management systems, and then look at some of the other trends that are impacting data professionals, including things like the growth in AI and analytics. We'll look at DevOps, which is something I haven't heard mentioned yet here, but how that interacts with data management professionals, particularly DBAs. We'll talk about IoT, we'll talk about cloud, and all of it basically with a data focus, obviously, given where we are. And then at the end, I want to talk a little bit about and what the industry is basically doing with data management professionals and DBAs and some of the problems that I think that's going to cause. So, the obligatory slide on data growth, data keeps growing. This is a slide that comes from IDC, and it talks about the global data sphere, and that's a term that they coined that kind of talks about all the data out there. And I put these slides up and I always think, who's the poor person who's actually counting every last byte out there? I mean, no one's doing that. These slides are basically just indicative of a trend, and I think probably the thing that is the most indicative here is this particular quote, that the total amount of data that's being captured and manages doubles every 1.2 years. Now, whether it's exactly double or not, it doesn't matter, but that's showing the slope and the growth of data. And there's really no slowing down of this anywhere on the horizon. We keep generating more and more data, and that means we have more and more data to use, but also more and more data to manage. When you look at IDC's figures on database software or database management systems, you can see that it continues to grow as well. If you look at the compound annual growth rate for the entire market of database software, it's about 8.4%. So database systems, people are still buying more and more of it, continues to grow annually. If you look at the other three categories, it's broken down into non-relational, dynamic databases, and relational. And dynamic is a term that has been coined for NoSQL. I'm not a big fan of it, but that's what IDC uses to talk about NoSQL, the dynamic database systems. And you can see non-relational going down with its compound annual growth rate. The NoSQL market, it's growing over 30% at a compound annual growth rate, whereas relational is kind of tracking the market at around 8%. And if you look at the slices of these bars, you can see why that is. It's because the NoSQL or the dynamic DBMS is such a smaller chunk of the overall pie. So it's growing rapidly, but from a smaller base than is relational. So both relational and dynamic continue to grow, and the market continues to grow for database software. When you look at how organizations are using database management systems, I've been in the industry for a long time, going back to the days when the whole idea was, we want one system of record and one database management system, and this is what we're going to put everything on. And today, you've got anywhere from, according to Gartner, 3 to 10 different DBMSs, and that I wouldn't be surprised if that number starts going up, at least in the short term. And by different database management systems, I mean different vendors, where you've got Oracle or DB2 or Microsoft, but then you've also got the NoSQL players, and we'll take a look at what all that means in a minute. And what's driving that is this notion of polyglot persistence. Man, that's a $10 word for a 1-cent idea. Really, it is the best database platform for the problem that you're trying to solve. So the right database in the right system at the right time. And that makes some sense too. So there are things that relational probably doesn't solve as well as a graph database does, or one of the other types of NoSQL DBMSs. And you can see listed here, we've got in-memory DBMSs, not just DBMSs, where, Hadoop, not so much in use as it was in the past, but people still using that. And you've got commercial, you've got open source, all these things driving the number of DBMSs out there. The other number on this slide I wanted to mention is that organizations on average have between 100 and 500 database instances, meaning a database that has been created in Oracle or Enterprise DB or what have you. So there's a lot of them still out there. I'm not going to get into this in any great detail other than to say that there's the relational world, which we all probably have worked with for a long point in time, and the growing world of NoSQL, where the main things that differentiate these two are a fixed schema versus a flexible schema, hard ACID versus non-ACID for the most part on the transactions of the NoSQL world. So as I mentioned, with polyglot persistence, we have organizations doing both of these, and that's perfectly fine, and that's the trend. Also mentioned by a couple folks earlier in the conference is this merging of database engines under a single DBMS, where we've got multi-model DBMSs, and this is kind of where the industry is going. So instead of for relational, I will install Oracle, and for NoSQL Graph, I will install Neo4j, and so on. Instead, you might be able to say, I've got an overarching solution to this where Oracle or DB2 or Cosmos has all of these things built in as a multi-model. And when I need graph, I choose that. When I need relational, I choose that. When I need a wide column store, I choose that. And it's all in the same DBMS. So this is becoming more and more of a trend going forward. With all these driving factors, though, things are getting confusing. And we're just talking about database management system Marketplace. We've got it where it's not just disk-based, but also in memory, where we've got most of the data that can reside in memory, or more and more pieces of the data can reside in memory. Not just relational, but also NoSQL, not just DBMS, also Hadoop and Spark, not just commercial, also open source, not just on premises, also in the cloud. And moving from the big three, if you've been in the industry for, maybe past 15 years, go back, there was this point in time when if you were doing development, if you weren't using one of the big three DBMSs, you were definitely an outlier, and that was Oracle and SQL Server and DB2. And those were the ones that were in vogue. And yeah, there was others, but they were, again, outliers. That's not the case anymore. And when I say confusing, I mean confusing. If you take a look at this is from 451 Research. They're an industry analyst group, and they put out what I like to call the subway map of database systems. And they break it down into different categories, but each one of those little dots on there is a operational DBMS choice that you have as an organization that you can bring in and implement. And this is hundreds of different choices. The part right in the middle where it says relational zone, that's where the big three live and breathe. They're still out there, but around all of that, we've got more growth in the relational world with additional open source offerings, with, as Michael Sternberger mentioned, new SQL type of offerings, but you've also got data grids and the NoSQL offerings and all these things coming together. And what I think this shows is that we're in a period of transition, because this is not sustainable. There is no way that if I get up here 10 years from now, let's say, and this is still the case, I'm glad that by that time I'll be almost ready for retirement, because this cannot stay. Some of these are going to have to consolidate. We're going to have some of them go by the wayside. We're going to have acquisition, and that's going to happen. It happens to every industry, and we may not get back to the days of the big three, but the big 10, the big 12, something like that is absolutely going to happen. Not today, not tomorrow, but definitely within the decade is my prediction. Still, relational continues to dominate. As we showed with that chart from IDC, 80% of the total operational database market, according to IDC, will continue to be relational through 2022. And Gartner has similar quotes here. Through 2020, which is just next year, relational technology will be used for at least 70% of new applications. Through 2018, which was last year, less than 5 non-relational vendors, that's what they call NoSQL, so dynamic if you're following the IDC research, are going to grow to a sufficient size to remain competitive. Now that doesn't mean they're going to go out of business, they're just not really competitive in the marketplace. So the state of the operational DBMS market is still very heavily relational and will continue to be for a while. Okay, next, let's move and talk a little bit about AI. Now, I'm not up here to train you or teach you about what AI is, but we're going to very briefly talk about some things and then get to a point that I really want to make about what's happening in the industry with AI. When you look at this, there's a lot of different terminology and a lot of different types of AI and machine learning and analytics. And sometimes people use these things interchangeably, and they really aren't. But they all are kind of bringing us up to this age of AI. And when you look at it, ever since I've been in IT, AI has always seemed like it's going to be the next big thing. It's the next big thing, next year, next decade, it's going to be AI, it's going to be AI. AI has existed since the 1950s. And only now are we really at the point where we have the computing power and the storage capable of making AI a reality. And when people ask me what's the purpose of AI, well, there's many purposes, but from a business perspective, I say it's all about moving away from the hippo. And what does that mean? We want to make decisions based on the data and not based on the gut of the highest paid person in the office, the HIPPO. Because that's the way most decisions get made if you're not doing it based on data. It's, well, whoever is the boss or the boss's boss, they have the last say. Well, that's fine, but we want that last say to be based on actual data, processed through algorithms that react and create the appropriate information so that we're doing business that will grow the business. And that, to me, is what AI is all about. Now, I said these things are all different, and this is, I'm not going to go over this in any depth other than to say it's in the presentation. You can get a high-level overview of what each of these things are and how they differ. But what does data have to do about it? Everything when it's machine learning. Machine learning is all about programming without writing code. It's feeding data into AI algorithms that process the data, find patterns, and make predictions. So in the machine learning world, data is everything. Your data is what's going to be fed into these machine learning algorithms to help make decisions for your organization. What does that mean? As a data professional, it means I'm a bit scared, because most organizations treat data very cavalierly. They say things like, we treat data as a corporate asset. And then you look at how they treat the data, and they're just big, filthy liars. they don't treat data as a corporate asset. You look at all the other assets in the organization, the chart of accounts, the money, it's modeled. Our personnel, we've got a org chart, it's modeled. Do you have a corporate data model? You'd be lucky if you even have data models for your most important databases in most organizations. And what really drove this point home for me was I was at the IBM Think conference in February of this year, and in one of the sessions, they said that only 12% of organizations have a data strategy. So they don't have a proper data protection, data governance, how we manage, how we organize data within the organization. So the data quality is going to be suspect. And I venture to say anyone here who's used the data within your organization probably would not say it's 100% accurate, right? Would you say it's 90% accurate? Well, there's all kinds of stats to show that in some cases it's not even 50% accurate. Now what we're doing is saying, here's all my data, machine learning, learn from it. And we just told them to learn from lies because the data is wrong, right? So we've got organizations clamoring to move to AI, what is it, 59%, according to this data zone guide, are saying they're either there or moving towards AI and machine learning. But they're not doing anything to clean the data. And this has been a problem for years, bad quality data. And what I'm hoping is that there's so much benefit behind AI and machine learning algorithms that organizations will finally put the effort into data quality, data cleansing, data governance, and create a data strategy. Especially, given some of the presentations earlier where we talked about moving from oil as what's driving the world to data as what's driving the world. If data is driving the world, we really should be managing it and protecting it better. Maybe AI will force that. According to Gartner, backing up some of the things I said, through 2020, 80% of AI projects are going to be run by people who the organization really has no idea what they're doing. And only 20% of them will provide any useful insight at all. And additional statistics kind of backing that up. Short term, we're probably not going to get the benefit out of AI and machine learning that everyone is saying we're going to get. And that backs up a theme that I'm going to come to through the presentation is short term, we tend to overestimate what's going to happen, and long term we tend to underestimate what's going to happen. So short term, you need to rein it in. Long term, you need to expand it out. And that's kind of, history bears that out. We'll quickly look at some of these additional trends as we move forward here. I think I've removed the in-memory part from the presentation to make sure that I can fit it into the time I've got allotted. So cloud deployments are growing. This should come as no surprise to anyone in this room. I think this data comes from Hurwitz and Associates, another industry analyst firm, showing the number of organizations that either are in place or moving towards it, and no plans for deployment at all is only 1% way out here on the horizon. Cloud deployments continue to grow. When you look at things over time from this study, it's, if you were cloud-based 2 years ago, about a quarter of folks. Cloud-based today, 44%. Cloud-based 2 years from now, 65%. More and more people doing more and more with the cloud. And that's absolutely accurate, and I think that's what's happening. That said, there's a rational exuberance. We'll get to that in a minute. It's basically table stakes for the DBMS vendors today to have database as a service capability. In other words, if you don't have some sort of database in the cloud offering you are really not following the market, and you kind of need to be there. And all the major players have it. You know, whether it's Oracle or SQL Server or IBM, the major DBMS players have it. Whether they're doing it themselves or they're building it on top of AWS, or building on top of Google, or, you know, IBM buying Red Hat. We know something's going to be happening there with that scaling up and becoming a major cloud player. And the reason for this is that, you know, the maintenance, the scaling, the cost, the day-to-day administration of the cloud database as a service offerings can be handled as a service cheaper and reduce the amount of things DBAs need to do so they can focus on more strategic issues. Well, that's true, but you also can't stop focusing on day-to-day just because you're in the cloud. There was a company I was working with, and they were using one of the database vendors in the cloud. And if you're at all familiar with how these work, you are on the bleeding edge when you're on the cloud. So if you are using the vendor's database as a service instead of on-premises, that means you're using version now, not version 1 release ago, not fixed pack 2 releases ago. It's now. And you have to be, as a DBA, as an operational person, aware of that. And you have to make sure that before that now rolls out, that it won't impact your organization. And this particular organization, there was some kind of a new reserved word, and they had applications that used that reserved word as a variable. How's that going to work out? It's not. You're going to have failures. And if you are not micromanaging at the DBA level all of the new things that are rolling out with every new release, you are going to wind up with those types of problems. So that doesn't mean you're rolling out the release. The database as a service provider is, but you have to understand what the impact is to all of your applications and how you use that database. That does not go away. That is still something a DBA has to do. You can see, you know, cloud market here, which vendor is this, which analyst service did this one. This is Gartner. You can see all the different types of cloud. You know, cloud isn't always the same thing either, right? You know, you've got all these different types of cloud implementation, whether it's infrastructure as a service or it's your application as a service, your database as a service, you know, all of these different things. And you can implement different areas of the as a service at your organization. And it is increasing. More and more people are adopting this. But in terms of irrational exuberance, whenever I hear the word all, my BS detector goes off. Because you should almost never say always or never. And it's rarely all or nothing. So I'll stand up here and say, we will never have all of IT in the cloud. Now I said, should almost never say always or never. I'm saying never. You will never have all in the cloud. And it will be slower than people think it is right now. This quote from Oracle. 80% of all enterprise and mission critical workloads will move to the cloud. No, they won't. A lot will. A lot of new development will. But not 80%. Maybe by the year 3000 when we're all dead. I won't. My never is my life frame. I'm 56 years old now. Hopefully I've got another 30 or 40 years. Not in the industry, but on the planet. Why is this? Even if demand is high and everyone wants to do it, the CSPs are going to have to build out the infrastructure to accept it. And that means that all of the data centers where all of your applications and everyone's applications run can get shut down because all of that has moved into the cloud. Anyone expect that to happen in their lifetime? Really? Not only is it unrealistic that that expansion is going to happen that quickly, all of those applications that currently run on premises, you can't flip a switch and say now they run in the cloud and nothing's going to have any problems. You're going to need to refactor these things. Here's an example. Even if everything other than the mainframe moved to the cloud, and that's unlikely. Think about, I'm a mainframe guy. I used mainframes for my whole career. These statistics come from this blog that are backed up with actual studies. 68% of the world's production IT workloads still run on mainframes. 71% of the Fortune 500 use mainframes. Mainframes handle 87% of all credit card transactions. Just this is much more than 20%, meaning that the Oracle prediction is wrong. Because this is not going to be in the cloud in any short-term duration. Okay, so cloud, great. I'm not saying cloud's bad. Cloud, great. Cloud, move to cloud, do things in the cloud, but don't have irrational exuberance about it. Internet of Things and data. Real quickly, what is the Internet of Things? It's where anything with an on-off switch gets hooked into the internet, right? And you're going to have physical devices and vehicles and home appliances and all these other items with embedded sensors and electronics and actuators that connect together and produce reams and reams of data. And if you look at the stats, the number of online devices increased 31% from 2016 to 2017, predicted to increase to 30 billion objects by next year. So, quick question. In the future Internet of Things world, how will you know when you wake up that you're going to have a bad day? Well, when you wake up and you find out that your coffee maker has unfriended you on Facebook, that will be a bad day in the IoT future. What's the impact of this, though? I'm a DBA, I'm a data professional, and hooking all this stuff up is great and it's producing more data, and that's great for me, right? Yes. It means that data is going to be coming at you quicker than ever before, and we already have a high velocity of data coming at us. It's going to keep being ramped up as we add sensors to all of these things and hook them up to the internet. That doesn't mean it all has to be stored, right? You've got streaming data coming at you, and it says, I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm on fire, I'm okay, I'm okay. Which one of those do you care about? Right? I want to find the I'm on fire and worry about that. I don't care about the other 99,000 I'm okays. Or from the perspective of I'm looking at healthcare data, and maybe I'm looking at blood pressures, and we see them all here. We care more about the things where it's high or where it's hypertensive. So we have things that we put on and where we store some of it, maybe the rest we don't store. And it all depends upon the application, what we really need for that type of data. So the IoT will have an impact on you as a DBA. You just can't put your head in the sand and say, I'm not going to worry about it. And this next example is my favorite story from all of last year. Hackers stole a Highroller database from a casino through an IoT-connected thermometer in the casino's fish tank in the lobby. They probably weren't thinking about much in the terms of security other than, well, I've got a thermometer out there and I can use my phone and I can change the temperature in the fish tank if the fish are getting cold or fish are getting warm. And that's all great, but we didn't think about the security of the architecture backing up the IoT in our organization and how the same network we're using had the Highroller database on it. Security. protection. Still something you need to worry about, and even more so as you hook more and more things into the IoT. And a lot of critical data remains unprotected. This again comes from IDC and their Digital Universe study, and it's showing that only half of the information that should be protected is actually protected. And the amount of data that requires protection is growing faster than the digital universe itself. So data protection is of paramount importance. Why? What are some of the things that are causing that? Data breaches. Unless you've had your head in the sand, you've noticed the vast amount of data that's been hacked or stolen from organizations. And you can go to this URL here. The Privacy Rights Clearinghouse tracks this data. Anytime there is a breach that's reported, they will track, where it was, the amount of data, the amount of money that was required to remediate it. It's a very useful website. The interesting things, over 8,800 data breaches since they've started keeping records in 2005. That was the Choice Point data breach. If you've been tracking this for a while, you know that was a significant landmark in this world. And over 11.5 billion total records have been breached. That's basically 12 data breaches every week. And it's not slowing down. And it's costly. The average cost of a breach is close to $4 million. That was in 2018, and that's up 6.4% over the previous year. Data breaches impact customer loyalty. So there's a long-term impact, not just the immediate cost of the things we have to do to remediate it, such as shut down the access, pay off our lawyers, notify the customers, pay for customers' credit monitoring. All these things factor into it. So every time data is breached, there's a raft of things that are being done on the back end to react to it, and not enough being done on the front end to prevent it. Just a simple example, SQL injection. If you're a DBA, you should know what SQL injection is. It's been around for a long time. And you would think in the decade plus that we've been aware that this can happen, that we would have remediated the issue. We'd have gone and we've fixed the code and we've fixed the sensitive spots. But we haven't. And if you look at this from the State of Software Security report, and it shows the percentage of applications affected by SQL injection attacks, it's pretty much a straight line, around 30%. And this is from 2011 through 2017. There's 7 years where we could have been out there fixing things that we know are vulnerable to attack, but we don't. Then there's more and more regulations coming saying, well, you got to do more things. This is just a high-level look at some of the audit requirements that you have and the multiple different regulations along the top, whether it's PCI or HIPAA or Sarbanes-Oxley or GDPR. All of them impact the type of things we have to do to monitor and protect sensitive data in our database systems. And regulations aren't slowing down either. We had GDPR, that was May of last year, that's all solved, right? Well, most organizations are today still not necessarily fully GDPR compliant. And then we've got the CCPA coming, and that's California's version of GDPR. California is usually the first to implement these regulations. It was a California regulation that caused data breaches to have to be reported. It's going to be a California regulation that brings this GDPR type protection to citizens of California first, and then probably the US eventually. So GDPR, if you were able to ignore it because you don't do business with European citizens, it's coming to the US. And at a high level, the security issues are pervasive for a number of reasons. There's, on the left-hand side of this slide, all these database security improvements that over the past number of years have been added to database management systems. So, improved auditing, improved encryption, granular system authority, all these things that have been reactions to the need to protect data more appropriately. And when you look and talk to DBAs and you ask them how many of you have implemented these things in your organization, if they even know what they are, they'll say, no, I haven't had a lot of folks clamoring for this. You need some kind of a mechanism to communicate from the technicians to the business people that this is even available. And you both talk different languages. And then on the other hand, on the right-hand side, less of a technical issue is that security professionals don't even know where the sensitive data is. So if you don't know where it is, how can you protect it? All of this needs work. Then there's DevOps. How am I doing? Okay, got a few minutes before you're all rushing out to lunch. DevOps and continuous delivery. And when you look at DevOps and what it is this concept of shifting left and doing more of the work earlier in the development process, instead of a waterfall methodology where we build large projects that take 6 months or years before anything even gets moved into production. We work instead with agile methodologies in sprints where we are implementing software quickly and continuously and every week, every other day, every month, quicker than we have in the past, coming out with software that delivers ROI to the organization. So DevOps has shown that it can increase the velocity of application deployment. And most organizations are moving their development in this way, and that's not a bad thing. However, DevOps is an amalgamation of development and operations. Unfortunately, it's more of DevOps. Development gets more of the focus in DevOps, and as database administrators, we're the ops. We're the operational aspect of this. And you look at what's happening, a lot of times it's instead of figuring out the right way to do it, which is to automate and integrate the database administration aspect of development into the whole DevOps chain. Instead, it is, well, we're going to make developers responsible for both application and the database, and they'll just pick it up, and they don't necessarily understand what a DBA does, but they can create a table, and you wind up with potentially a mess unless you've really integrated ops into dev. And that's what needs to happen. And when you look at it, the database is different than the application, in terms of how you roll out changes, right? The application, you basically compile something and move it, whole, done, moved. With a database, you don't move exactly what's in test into production, and you don't do it wholesale. You're going to make changes to it. So it has to be some sort of change management in terms of not drop the database and recreate it, like you get rid of the old code and put the new code in. Instead, you take the old database and you make iterative changes to it. And you need ways to enable that change to be implemented appropriately and correctly in a way that's going to perform. So you look around the bottom of this slide and you see all these DevOps type products that are there to help orchestrate and integrate what you're doing on a development side, what we need is the same thing on the database side, the database change management product, the database SQL performance testing product, the test data management product, and they all need to be automated in such a way that the DBA understands and blesses what's going on here and it's actually going to work, and that the developers can just integrate it and work with it and it moves forward. That's where it needs to go. We're not there yet. Dev is there, ops needs work. Okay, said I'd talk a little bit about DBAs at the end. I got about 5 minutes. The job of DBA is changing, and it's in some ways getting better, in other ways getting more complex, and in a lot of ways becoming more and more difficult because of the way in which management treats database administration. Let me look more into that. First of all, if you've got any DBAs here, does this look like you during the course of a day, rooted to your desk? What are these trends? Well, fewer DBAs are being asked to manage more data. We've got more and more growing data, as we showed at the beginning of the presentation with the overall data sphere from IDC. And even the big data trend shows that more and more data, but it's not translating into additional DBAs. It's like when you start doing AI and machine learning and big data projects, your organization grew data by doubling it in 1.2 years. Did you double the number of DBAs? Anyone? No. Not a chance. On top of that, DBAs are not sole product managers anymore. The days of the DBA in the corner who's a wizard about Oracle and knows everything soup to nuts are pretty much over, because that DBA is also being asked, oh, well, you know Oracle? Okay, then you're going to run and do SQL Server too. And oh, well, we also brought in Neo4j. You can work with that. And oh, by the way, the Hadoop team needs some help. So you've got all these different platforms you have to manage. There's no way you're the same expert on all of them. So the expertise of the DBA is diminishing as well. These slides come from a Unisphere study. That's the folks who publish database trends, including both relational and non-relational. How many different brands of DBMS does your organization support? Anywhere from 1 up to more than 5. That 1 is a very small chunk, 4%. What you should be doing if you want an easy DBA job is to call up Unisphere and say, tell me who those organizations are. I'm sending my resume. But we also see that the DBAs who are responsible for relational are also responsible for non-relational, Hadoop, NoSQL, the vast majority. Almost 70%. Again, diminishing of the skill level. This is from Computer Economics, a study done in 2015, so it's a little dated, but I haven't seen anything change in the past couple of years. That data management staff, as a percentage of IT staff, has risen 0.5%. Minuscule. Now, from 2015 through 2019, where we say data doubles every 1.2 years, it should have doubled, doubled, and doubled again. But the people managing it haven't. Percentage of DBA versus staff. So the other one was data management as a whole. This is just DBA. You can see that pretty consistently right around 3%. So the entire IT staff, 3% of that number the DBAs that support that IT staff. Now, whether that's bad or not depends on how much of that additional IT staff actually uses the database systems that the DBAs are in charge of. And if you look at predictions, things aren't getting any better anytime soon. This is from Quinn Street Enterprise Research, and they're saying that by next year, the world will generate 50 times as much data. So over this 5-6 year period, 50 times as much data, but the IT staff managing it will grow 1.5 times. So unless there's a whole raft of automation behind this, there are problems afoot in terms of how you manage data. And then getting back to my whole notion about AI needing to drive better quality data, better governed data, what are the chances of that happening if this continues to stay true? I think it's slim. So on that happy note, just a lot is happening. You know, I've got things up here that I didn't even mention in this database trends. I've only got so many minutes to talk to you today, but you know, data lakes and blockchain and you know, all these different aspects of data management are still happening, and it's a great field to be in with a lot of stuff happening. So I don't want to discourage you from being in it. If you need to get in touch with me, my contact information. That's all I have for you. I went over a couple minutes, so I'm the only thing between you and lunch. Apologize for that. The presentation is up on the website, and I'll be here through tomorrow if you have any questions for me. Thanks for your time.